Thea, first and foremost, congratulations on the film. It looks amazing. It's beautiful. I loved it. I wasn't actually a fan of the book. I mean, I didn't know about the book growing up. So this has opened my eyes to a whole new world. But I read about something that you were doing called hybrid shooting. Can you walk me through your shooting process?
Uh, I can try. Thank you. I'm thrilled that you like the movie. That's great to hear. It's really great actually to hear people who don't know anything about the book and they don't know anything about the story, and they just come to it, anew. So that's great to hear. So hybrid shooting, we essentially called it hybrid because I guess we had three elements. It is maybe the easiest way to break it down when it came to shooting. We either had human to human shooting, right, as normal, conventional. Then we had humans with animals. And that was actually the element that we called the hybrid because it was both human and animal. And to achieve that, we had various different ways to represent the animals. So, for example, we had an amazing actor called Ben Bishop, who was my Ivan throughout. So he was on calipers every day. So whenever Brian had a scene with him, or Ariana or Ramon had a scene with him, Ben would be there. So he never spoke as Ivan,
right?
But he would make noises and physically be able to move around, so that they could then, as it were, act against him or with him. But we also had, like for Stella, we had two guys in green, making up. So we had her ears and her back, and they would sort of move her around so that, again, if she was in the scene, all the actors would understand where she would, how big she was and what they could touch and what they couldn't touch. And for the dogs, we had Bob in particular. We had a brilliant guy on as a puppeteer, essentially. Right. In the end, with the chicken and with the seal and the rabbit, they had much less interaction with the humans. So we just had stuffies, so wherever they needed to be, so that the humans would know they were there. So that was the second element. And then the third element was the completely virtual element, which is whenever we had scenes that were just animals, no humans.
Right.
And that had its own completely different method, which would start with recording the voices, which I then edited with my editor into like a radio play almost. So you had nothing to see, but you would just hear them playing out a scene. We would give those to the animators, and the animators would then begin to build the characters literally by using the voices. And it was the voices that would lead the personalities, let's say, of each of the animal characters.
That's super fascinating. That's crazy. I wanted to actually talk about Ben Bishop for a second, because I know that he did all of Ivan. I was going to ask what did he bring to the role of Ivan that may have not necessarily been there had it been like another way of shooting?
He brought the heart and soul of Ivan through his body. So Sam Rockwell gave me the heart and soul of Ivan through his voice. And Ben would listen, and I would sit with Ben and we would listen to how Sam read a line, so that Ben would hear that and be able to reflect that in his physicalization of a line. So, the layers were very close, and we had to, it's like a kind of crazy 3D puzzle that is constantly moving, or like a Rubik's Cube almost, that is constantly moving. Because sometimes, for example, we would listen to a line and Ben would say, or I would say on hearing it, I think, actually, now that I'm seeing you physically move with the line, it feels to me like that would be a bit slower, because I think you're a bit more sad than I realized when I was with Sam. And so then I would go back in with Sam and we would re-record that line to then reflect what we'd learned through the physical rehearsal with Ben.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Now, I know you're a big fan of the book. What were you most excited to bring to life? What scene from the book were you most excited to bring to life?
That's a good question. Um, it's hard because we made some interesting choices to move away from the book that were also favorite scenes of mine. So, for example, probably this is not exactly answering your question, but I will do. But I I knew that the goodbye scene between Ivan and Mac
Right.
was going to be a really powerful scene. And it was one that I really looked forward to doing and talked a lot about with both Brian and Ben and Sam. Um, and so that was a real biggie. And in the book, because the character of Mac is quite different in the book, so they never have that same. It's not quite written in the same way.
Right. Right.
Although, interestingly, on the day of shooting, I did as I always do. I went back to the book just to kind of triple check, the spirit was in the right place. And there was an extra line that Mac said in the book that I'd forgotten about because Mike White and I had, been one of the things that in the millions of versions of drafts of the screenplay we'd taken out. And it was so moving and so touching, and it just grabbed me. And I remember going to Brian, and he'd already done hair and makeup. We weren't far away from turning over. And I just said, just read this. And he was like, I've got to say that. And I was like, you've got to say that. And because it was new for us by then, it was quite late into the process. So we were very confident with each other. We were very confident that we knew who Mac was. We were very confident about what this scene was and why it was so important. But it was one of those joyful things that at the last minute you make a change that re-inspires you, if you like. So that was one of the scenes I was most looking forward to. And conversely, or at the same time, I remember so much wanting to get right Ivan saying goodbye to Ruby.
Right.
And Ivan saying goodbye to Bob.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're bringing it back to me now. I do have to ask, you had such an amazing roster of actors to voice these amazing characters. Can you talk to me about the collaboration process working with them and how much kind of like freedom they were to like ad lib and stuff like that to really put their stamp on those characters?
Honestly, they were all great. They really were. And they were so different, and they all brought their own energy, which was fantastic. So if you take Danny and Sam, for example, most of their recordings I did together whenever I possibly could, because so many of their scenes were, they were in it together, and it always helped them both if they were together. They could just be more playful. And so what we ended up doing every time was we would shoot or record what we had on the page, what we'd written. And then always I would let them go and do whatever they wanted to do. And, sometimes they were pretty wild. Sometimes they came up with stuff that we knew we could never, ever use. And sometimes they came up with absolute gold that is in the movie and will always be there, because it was just an instinctive, instantaneous moment between the two of them that neither Mike nor I could never have come up with beforehand, Right. So, yeah, I mean, listen, Shaka Khan burst into song in the middle of one of her sessions. I know.
That's amazing.
Awesome, man.
Well, fantastic film. I love hearing these stories about the behind the scenes stuff. Amazing job. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you.